Hi guys, Donna here, and today I have the pleasure of talking to someone live from the UK, Miss Shelley F. Knight. Today we're going to be discussing her journey. She had a dream of being a nurse, and a lot of people can aspire to that. I know a lot of people that I've had friends that wanted to be nurses, but Shelley's journey has been one of success in it and challenges. So I'm going to let Shelley start us off with, was it better to do this? Don't answer the question though. Was it better to have your journey of following your dream of being a nurse? And what happened during that time? Take it
Bless you.
away.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No problem.
Yeah, so I've zigzagged through my career. I did like nursery nursing, then I did nursing, and yeah, I've zigzagged through. But I've always wanted to be of service. It's always been a career like that. And so nursing was my dream. I think it formed a lot of my identity for many years, actually. And I went through nursing. But when we do our careers, we go through life as well. And that kind of changed how nursing was for me. So I've now left nursing, which obviously raised the question, was it better to nurse or not to nurse?
Well, I mean, there's reasons, even though when we have a dream, sometimes the dream doesn't turn out exactly how we want it to. So, I mean, when you started dreaming about being a nurse, were you a little girl, or was this something you hit when you were a teenager?
So I was about 5 years old and I said to my mum that I wanted to be a veterinary nurse originally, so for like animals. But my mum pointed out it'd be a very limited career because I'm a bit precious. That I love animals, but I don't really like to touch snakes, reptiles, insects, fish, really, just generally dogs I like. And so she started to highlight the problems I might have being a veterinary nurse quite early on in life. But I am really caring and loving, and I love people. And it kind of was just there. So I think I said earlier, I did like nursery nursing. So that's looking after children, like nannying and things like that. And I loved that. But it just grew as I grew in life. It sort of grew with me. And I just love the life experience, finding solutions to problems. I think, good health. I'm a bit nosy, so I love to meet new people every day. And so it became a dream. I'm just fascinated by people, because we are all so different. I know there's a foundation where, we all come in life and we all exit life. We're all very similar in that way. But I just love like the life experience people have, trying to make things better for people. So yeah, it became a dream around the age of 16, really.
Okay. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like we do evolve and our dreams change. So at 16, you decide you want to be a nurse and you started with infants. And what did that lead to? Did you decide that you wanted to expand that? You wanted to work with adults? You wanted more interaction? What made you change from dealing with the youth and nannying and babies?
Yeah, well, I think I went through a quarter life crisis. You hear about a midlife crisis. I got to like 24 and had this really inner niggle. We call it that, Donna, an inner niggle. Like, why am I here?
Okay.
And so I actually took a break from work and actually traveled for about 18 months around the world. And if we look back on our life, I probably think, oh, that's where my spirituality sort of started. But I kind of went around the world searching for myself, realizing I was me all along. So I took a break. And when I did return to the UK, I sort of worked in medical research and went to uni. So, whilst I wanted to be a nurse around the age of 16, I went as a mature student at the age of 28, which is deemed quite old in this country.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing about it is going to college with some life experience behind you, because I did the same thing. I didn't go to university until I went when I was 19, and then I didn't finish, and then I went back when I was 27. And even though people look at you like, "What are you doing here?" You have a better perspective of what's going on and being presented to you, and how it fits into everyday life where the younger person just like, hey, at least here, let's party. So, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's true because I was painfully shy, and people really struggle with that now, thinking she never stops talking. I can't believe it. But I was painfully shy up to about the age of 16. But traveling on my own, you had to make conversations. It'd been a very lonely 18 months otherwise. So I traveled for 18 months. I had to make the conversation, life choices. So then you've got a story about you. There's depth to your life story. There's a depth to the one chapter at least. So when I came back, as you say, I was probably better prepared then to go to university. And I loved it. I absolutely loved uni life. I wasn't a great drinker, really, because nursing doesn't give you many hours free, if I'm honest. But I absolutely loved it going at that age when I sort of got things out my system, that inner niggle, that travel bug. I was then in a better place to work with stomach bugs, maybe. I don't know.
Possibly.
But I absolutely love nursing. It was petrifying at times, don't get me wrong. The level of accountability, and thrown at the deep end, staff shortages, death, everything that's in it is absolutely petrifying at times. But in those early years, I absolutely loved it.
And, I'm sure dealing with someone that is either in the moments of passing or death is a very hard thing to deal with. And it has to affect you on a personal level. Even though you try not to be so attached to it, I'm sure it still has to affect you somewhat when you're dealing with that, correct?
Yeah. So I originally worked in acute medicine. So that's not quite like emergency rooms at A&E. It's like when they've gone through that, they then go to acute medical ward where you'll be hopefully made better with medicine. It's the idea. But it's a bit where my plot twist happened, actually, and why I left nursing many years later. But the plot twist at that stage of my career was I was working in acute medicine on New Year's Day when my mum phoned the ward, which is a really bad thing if your parents phone you at work. You're always like, don't phone me at work,
Yeah.
unless anyone's died, don't phone me at work. And then my mum phoned me at work. And she told me, just a few words, David's dead. So basically, my stepdad had died suddenly in the early hours of New Year's Day.
Oh no.
And I suppose, again, I just call it a niggle. There's probably some scientific term for it, but to me, it's a niggle. I'd had a niggle for a while that I didn't want to be in that ward anymore. And it's a bit like the tower card in tarot. This was the push I needed.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's sort of like create the change, woman, or it'll be made for you. So I took this call early hours of New Year's Day. My gorgeous, gorgeous stepdad had died. And that was like the plot twist. It was a sudden death, had to sort of go home, wasn't treated very nicely by the ward for being off work and things like that. But when I went to return to work, it was like, I was that the nurse that got the phone call? Was that the nurse whose dad's died? And it was just like that tower card. You think, I don't want to be here. I feel
Yeah.
really awkward. I know we make ourselves feel that way. And it was probably just the push I needed. So that's where the first twist to my career came, that I'd been working around death. But when I was told about death on duty, I then kind of was a bit more honest with myself, like, where did I want to be? And I'd wanted to work in hematology and oncology for years. So I did, but it's a bit of a strange thing. So bear with me if it doesn't resonate with the listener. So my beautiful stepdad had died suddenly. Didn't get a chance to say goodbye. But in like oncology and hematology, like cancers and that, often there's a diagnosis, but there's a chance to say goodbye. There's a chance to get everything in order, to sort of like, right the wrongs,
Right.
bucket lists, all things like that. So I actually went to hematology and oncology almost as a healing journey, because I wanted to know what it was like to have that time at the end of life, what it's like when you have a chance to say goodbye to your loved ones. What is it like when your time? Because we don't know, do we? You're always sort of busy saving money and things like that, but we always know how much money we've got. We don't know how much time we've got. And so it became the most privileged job in the world, working at the end of life. And it's a lot of where like my first and second book come from. And so I was in hematology and oncology for years, absolutely loved it. And it is that, it goes back to the thing like, was it better to have nursed or not nursed?
Yeah.
And in that moment, in that career choice, it was definitely better to have nursed, because it got me to the author, the podcaster, and the woman I am today.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but you walked away from it.
Yeah, because life has this habit of just flinging poo at a fan, to put it nicely.
Yes, yes, it does. Yes, it
Yes,
does.
that proverbial fan. So my stepdad died, which was my own wake up call. I moved into a speciality that I'd wanted to do for months and never been honest about. But from that, I started to have lost in other ways. And I'm really open now. I couldn't have done it a few years ago. but I've had a horrible fertility journey, and I kept trying to fall pregnant, which I'm quite good at falling pregnant, not so good at staying pregnant, if you get my gist.
Yeah.
And I've had numerous losses, numerous miscarriages. And I think people are always surprised by that because we have 4 children. I think I'm sort of like the queen of fertility, but I've had an awful journey. And so whilst I was there as a chemotherapy nurse and continually having consecutive losses, I then started to think it was too toxic. I know it's a bit controversial, but I thought, was it toxicity of the chemotherapy causing me to miscarry? So, I tried various departments around that kind of thing, but that's when I first stepped away from nursing. I had 2 children by then, which had been quite difficult, but then I had 5 consecutive losses. And
Oh.
so I stepped away from nursing for quite a few years, like almost a decade, I'm thinking, but I'm sure it wasn't. Time flies when you're having fun. But I stepped away because I thought it was toxic. And whether that was on an emotional level, spiritual, social, psychic, whatever, it just wasn't working. I wasn't falling pregnant and staying pregnant. I didn't have the take home family. I had a successful career. I'd gone into the private sector. I had the car, the salary, and things like that. But I didn't have my family. And I think having worked at end of life for so long, it's not about the money or the career. It is about the family, the connection, the quality of your life, and things like that.
It's interesting that you mentioned the toxicity because when I was an interview I did earlier this week, she was talking about she had worked in corporate America, and she was talking about the fact that it was very toxic, and it was a very toxic environment. It started affecting where, because there was other outside factors as well, but she couldn't digest food. It was
Oh,
taking
wow.
its toll on her. And me, in my corporate career, I used to be an insurance claim supervisor. And I started out as a claim supervisor. And while that might not seem like a big deal, sometimes when you're dealing with people taking recorded statements and finding out about their accidents that they had, you're hearing about a gentleman who he may have swerved because he saw a snowplow cross a lane, and he swerved trying to avoid it. And the snowplow takes out the side of the car his daughter's in. And you're not trained as an adjuster. You're not trained to have this whole, I don't want to say kumbaya moment, and they don't teach you that you're going to be dealing with this. You're just kind of dropped in, and so you have to look at that factor of, how do I handle this emotion after I take that statement? How do I deal with this? Because you're dealing with somebody in that moment of grief. You were talking about the fact that death is sudden, and we don't always know. My husband passed last summer. 2 weeks before he died, he told me to go clean out his extra clothes in the guest room. And I'm like, why? He goes, because I'm not going to need them anymore. And he had this shirt that was a running joke, and it said, "Fear me, for I had the power to destroy you." So the day before he died, I was still doing all this cleaning up, and I walked into the bedroom and I said, "Do you still want the shirt?" And he looked at me, and really, when I look back at it, it's just a heartbreaking moment. He's like, "No, because I don't have that power anymore." And it was just like, and I mean, it was never really that he had that power, but it was just the whole sentiment. And then by the following afternoon, he would have started his journey for his demise. So it's sometimes I think we know, even though we don't know, there's certain signs that present. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so let me ask you this: going through such tragedy of losing, having 5 miscarriages, assuming consecutively, how did you make the decision that you still wanted to go forward with this? I mean, it had to be heart-wrenching for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, we tend to sort of brush over it, don't we? We get on later in life. And I only realized this because my husband, he sort of like does contracts. So he goes into new places, introduces himself. And you say we've got 4 children. I was like, wow. And he goes, oh, yeah, but we've had like 11 pregnancies. And you get quite flippant with it, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it was, my age was one factor because I was like 32 when we had our first. But it is like with any positive change you want to make in your life, if you really want it, you just have to go for it. And don't get me wrong, it was not easy because I wasn't really healing or debriefing after the losses, because I just thought, like, next try, next try. But it was actually my husband as well, because he was just sort of like, if we really want this, we really need to keep going. And that's kind of life, isn't it? If you really want something, you have to keep going, even if your heart's breaking, your soul's, bruised,
Yeah.
until you get what you want or your soul needs. You just keep going. But that's my mentality. I know a lot of people don't, and they just will get stuck in that chapter thinking, maybe I had a miscarriage, it's too painful, I can't do it. I'm a feisty ex-nurse, so I'm just sort of like, I want it. And I have this thing, many lessons from the end of life, really. And it's about regrets. And I learned that we never regret the things we do in life. We only regret the things we don't do in life. And so I don't want to get to the end of my days and think, what if, if I sat here with just the two children, what if I had have, gone to have more children? I don't want that conversation. I want to get to the end of my life knowing I had a really huge psychological journey, but I've got 4 beautiful children.
Yeah.
And it is just that going for it. And it's not easy because it's a human life we're talking about. Do you know what I mean? It's not a number, it's a life. But I just think with anything in life, if we really want it, we have to just get that balance right between sort of like that fear of failure to that fear of being stuck or not achieving. And for me, every time I'd risk the failure.
And the fear is a very tricky thing because yeah, there's fear of failure, but there's also fear of success. Some people suffer from that, so they get stuck because they have that fear of success. It's like, well, what's going to happen if I'm successful? Who knows? It may be beyond your wildest dreams, and then it may turn into a turd sandwich. Who knows? But you have to try it, and you can definitely look back and say, I did that. Do you think, and you talked a little bit about the travel thing. Do you think that helped ground you a lot better because your wanderlust was satisfied because you did all the traveling?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always act on the niggles now. I don't know what the term is. Maybe it's intuition. Maybe it's my soul just trying to give me a mighty whack from the inside out. But I'll call it a niggle. But I just always wanted to. And again, it's just sort of like that curiosity of what is out there. And if I was a cat, I'd be dead because I'm just always curious. So, I mean, I'm always investigating and trying. But I had this niggle. I wanted to see there was more beyond, the little village where I lived. There was more beyond my parents' broken marriage. There was more between my broken relationships, the jobs I'd done I didn't like. And I just always, even now at 47, I'm still feisty thinking, I'll just try that one more thing. And those other 27, But yeah, I wanted to travel. And it's interesting because my husband and I have been together like 15 years and he never traveled when he was younger. And he goes, oh, I wish I had. So it's like, no, you don't, because that wasn't you. Do you know what I mean? It's just
Uh-huh.
that comparison. Comparison's a killer, isn't it?
Yes, it
But
is.
yeah, and he thinks he wants to travel because I travel and tell these stories, but that's not his life journey, his life lessons. But now with 4 kids, a cockapoo, 9 fish, I'm so glad I traveled on my own.
Yeah, because that's a menagerie. I mean, you're not going to take the fish and stuff, but it's still a menagerie and all the logistics of who's going to take care of the fish and is the
Yeah.
fish going to survive while we're gone? How many times has that little story happened that somebody's fish passed away?
Yeah.
So
It's a given.
where exactly did you travel?
So I started in Camp America because I used the nursery nursing qualification to sort of do Camp America. So I started there, went to Canada, fell a little bit in love with Canada, if I'm honest. And then I came back, got a visa, and then I went to Fiji, Tahiti, Rarotonga, Australia, New Zealand. If anyone wants me in New Zealand, please just let me in. Um, Tasmania, it's my backup option. If you've got anyone there that wants me, I'll have that as well. And I just had a blast. I mean, as I said earlier, I was painfully shy as a child up to the age of 16, but it just made me who I am today, and then you have those dark days that we do, even as an author on positive changes, I still have dark days when I think, oh, what am I doing with my life? You just think, oh, I lived on a beach in Australia and I met that gorgeous guy here,
Yeah.
and you could do it in your local town if you're lucky than I was. But for me, the answers are out there in the world, and it's a comfort to me that I have done that. I have traveled. Yeah.
I think travel, you also get to see different people's culture. I mean, that allows you to experience so many different things. I haven't traveled, the only place I've gone internationally, although I have my passport now, is Canada. Um,
Ah,
but I mean, I've lived several different places in the United States, and you know, Louisiana is a grand example. I grew up in New Orleans, and I moved to Shreveport, which is in the northern quarter corner of it. And when I lived in New Orleans, we had this whole demeanor of we talk one way, but if you saw a movie like anything in the 80s, we all had that southern drawl. Like, no, no, we don't. So when I moved to Shreveport, everybody's like, "Are you from New York?" I'm like, "No, I'm from New Orleans." "No, you sound like you're from New York," because I didn't have that accent. So, and just I went from New Orleans, which is party capital, and at the time Shreveport was very Christiany home, it was very tight knit. You certain things were closed on Sundays that were open in New Orleans, and it was just culture shock. So I imagine from going from country to country, that was even more of a culture shock for you.
Yeah, my granddad, I mean, bless him, he's now up in heaven looking down. But he was quite upset by my voice because it was sort of like a little bit American with a little twang of good day from Australia. And then when I got back, I lived in Birmingham, like the black country here,
Uh,
where I can't even do the accent. I'm not going to embarrass myself on air, but there's a really thick accent.
uh-huh.
And he was just sort of like, where did your voice go?
Trust me. I mean, and the thing is that the longer you're away from your home, you do lose your accent. I mean, lived here for 26 years, and a lot of people are like, I don't hear New Orleans anymore. And when I talk to my relatives down there, it's like, wow, yeah, I can hear the accent. Because when I left, I'm like, I don't have an accent. You don't notice that you have an accent. But it's interesting because I think, did you learn about different type? I mean, I know you did, but did you decide that you had certain foods that you loved in America and Canada compare and your other travels compared to your food from home?
Yeah, I loved like Australia and Thailand and places like that. There's a lot of emphasis on eating outdoors, which I absolutely loved. America was a time of poverty. That was the start of my travels before I'd been really working. So that was a lot of Wendy's.
Wendy's value meal.
Yeah, that 99-cent meal. If it wasn't for that, I'd be dead. So do you know what I mean? I'd be malnutrition stuck on a roadside somewhere.
I think that's the common poor, young American thing, that and ramen noodles. Ramen noodles in many different ways. Um, so you also mentioned the tarot card. So I take it that you are familiar with the tarot.
Yeah, so as I said, my life's just like been on this crazy journey where I think I've got my stuff together, and it's like, hang on, let's throw a few more deaths in there, Shelley. You look a bit bored. So yeah, my stepdad died. My grandparents have died. I've had the infertility things, and you need to find something that works in your life for you. So I think somewhere around like the second child, I started to find what works for me that's not medical, basically, what's not clinical. And this is a huge part of my journey that, you got all the medical things, but it wasn't resonating with why am I having this not hard life? Do you know what I mean? I'm sure I signed up for it. But from that, I started to sort of sit in a meditation circle. Then we'd sort of do sort of like connect with spirit, and then it'd be oracle cards, and then it'd be a crystal and things like that. And I was just gathering these little things, trying them. And yeah, I do tarot card every morning, just like do a shuffle. What do I need to know today? And just go with it. Yeah. Unless it's the 10 of Wands, and I always stick that one back in, think that's not the one for me. Thank you.
Well,
That's just,
on my deck, the Cosmic Tarot, the Ten of Swords is a guy basically in a straitjacket, and he's got all the
oh,
swords going at him, and his mouth's open. But the interesting thing, and I always point this out when it comes up in a reading, is his hand is free. You can't really see his hand, but his hand is free. So it's like
yeah.
you're in control. You can get out of your own head to do this. But most people, it's amazing when you read cards. And have you read cards for others? I take it you might have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do it intuitively. If you've got a guidebook of like the Rider White tarot, you'd be like, what is she on about?
No, I
But because it wouldn't be the traditional meaning. But for me, like, the like the 10 of Swords, for example, to me, I hate that card. I love the death card, I like the tower card, but the 10 of Swords to me is just like kind of like we haven't got to this yet, but another part of my journey of loss. And it's just that rock bottom, that
yeah,
semicolon moment. Do I carry on or do I just play dead?
yeah.
And the 10 of Swords to me is just darkness. But actually, as you say, you've got one hand free in your tarot. Mine is there's a new day dawning. You can just see a little
Yeah.
glimmer of light, a glimmer of hope just starting to come back up.
And I think that's the thing about, especially now, when I started reading tarot, there was not as many decks. Now there's so many decks and there's so many interpretations. Like yourself, I do read intuitively. I was taking an intuition class, and I took another part of the intuition class, and I was the only student. And the lady who was the teacher was a reader. She was my reader. And when I cracked open my deck, because I loved it, it has a lot of Hollywood celebrities and stuff of the olden days. And she's like, "You see this book?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Throw it away." I'm like, "Excuse me?" She goes, "Throw it away." I'm like, "All right." She's like, "You're going to read intuitively. This is what you do. I know you have the ability, so do it." And she made me, we went through the cards real quick, not even really fully looking at it. She goes, "Okay, you're going to do a reading for me."
Wow.
Okay. And so I did, and off I went, and then I did a Halloween party, and I don't think there's anything wrong with reading intuitively. I mean, I know there's certain purists that'll sit there and go, "You're wrong." But I think if the card, and that's what I always say too, when you're picking out a deck, pick out a deck that calls to you. Don't don't just go, "Oh, well, everybody's got a rider Waite." I can't read a rider Waite to save my life because I just don't connect with it. I mean, I'm sure I could read it, but it's just not, it's not there. I'm not
Yeah.
connected to it. So, but I appreciate that you don't think the Tower of the Death card is the worst thing in the world. That's usually when you pull that in a reading for somebody, they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's the death card." And I always look at them and say, "Death, that's actually my card. If you go by birth dates, that's my card. So there you go."
Oh, I love it. I just think,
Yeah.
especially if you're having a difficult time, you
Yeah.
just think, thank God for that. Something's ending, there's a new beginning.
Exactly. And that's how you try to explain it to people, but they don't always get it.
Clinging
Um
to that past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to do anything. I don't want death. Well, it's not physical. So you say this journey you've been on. So how did you get into, so you've had the miscarriages, you've left work, correct? And then you decided to go into podcasting, writing, and the spiritual side of things. How did this metamorphosis take place?
I actually returned to nursing at one point. I thought I'd try.
Hmm.
I think I've worked for so long, I'll go back. And if I'm honest, it kind of was part of my identity. Do you know what I mean? As a nurse, you feel quite cool, quite proud. You have a purpose, you're making a difference. So I went back and then left. Remember why I left first time? But yeah, I think it was my last pregnancy. There's a happy ending. She's 6. But
Nice.
my last pregnancy was a multiple pregnancy. We would believe it was triplets, certainly twins. And I just kept losing and losing. And then I was told to terminate this pregnancy, but I couldn't because, or one, there's a high chance I was going to miscarry anyway. That was my story. I do miscarry really easily. But the other thing was, I'd seen my daughter. She wasn't born, but I knew I had a dark-haired baby girl to come. And our last child was a blonde boy. So, and I'd had it for about 18 months, 2 years, and it was just getting clearer and clearer, more frequently. So I went through with that pregnancy, but in that pregnancy, it was my semicolon moment. You know, when you think, do I end my story here? Am
Mhm.
I done? Is this too much for my soul to carry? And so it's my last pregnancy where I had to make a decision. Do I carry on with my life and do I end it? And I think people are surprised by that because I describe myself as a positive changes expert. And they think, well, you thought committing suicide once. It's like, all the more reason I can tell you it's possible to create
Right.
positive change. So I had this sort of like suicidal thoughts around my pregnancy, my life, which made no sense because I had 3 gorgeous children, a lovely husband, but it was a lot for me to bear. So obviously I'm here, so I decided to
Yeah.
continue. But it was in that pregnancy that everything just changed for me. I had that vision. I had the doctors saying, you need to terminate. She's going to die within 28 weeks of your pregnancy. She won't survive in the outside world. With that intuition, that vision. And Donna, that's all I had. I just had this recurring vision and I just ran with it. So I just embraced every spiritual thing I had ever heard of, not heard of, and just went with it. So I had like psychic surgery, Reiki healing, affirmations, calling on miracles, grounding, connecting, card readings, color therapy, anything you could think of.
Hmm.
I gave to that pregnancy, gave to that bump, gave to myself, you know. And without that journey, without deciding to stay on this earthly plane, without deciding to bring this vision to fruition, I wouldn't be spiritual like I was now. But when you try so many spiritual tools and they work, for me personally, it was really hard to go back into a clinical setting,
Hmm.
you know. And as I'd seen my daughter come to fruition, how I saw people dying changed as well, not just like how they shared what's important in life, not their life lessons, but I was aware of like temperature changes. I could see energy around the body. I was aware when the soul left the body, even though the doctors would be prescribing more medicines, I knew that soul had gone. And it's really hard. Well, it's really hard for me. Let's bring it back to me. It's really hard for me to be that spiritually aware we're more than our physical body and be a down to earth, practical nurse. So that's why I changed. That niggle had been there for years, that I wanted a spiritual career. I wanted something where I was of service to people, but without the night shifts and the drug rounds and, you know, the arguments with family and doctors. And so it was in that last pregnancy that I just become really aware of what's available to us spiritually. And then I was sort of like, you know, square peg, round hole, we say here, that I didn't really fit into nursing.
Mhm.
I still love the end of life, the conversations, the lessons I still live by. But it's really hard to go back in when you can say to the doctors, sort of, oh, don't bother with the antibiotics, I can see their souls leaving, you know, or like you say with your husband, there's an awareness
Yeah.
that things are changing,
Yeah.
you know, and that's what my second book's about, which is really controversial, but it's called Good Grief, the A to Z approach to modern day grief healing. And it says clinically, this is what you'll observe around your loved one's bed. Spiritually, this is what's happening. And I know it's controversial and people don't want to hear it, and that's fine. But that's why I gave up nursing, because I was just sort of like, I've done the clinical and tried to save people, try to reassure people, but we're more than our physical body. We're more than that bad chapter of our life. You know, I'm more than my miscarriages. And yeah, so I did, you know, that was my dream, to be a nurse, to be of service, but I knew also I wanted to do something for me. And I've always wanted to write a book, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's like a thing that everyone wants to do, but I always wanted to write a book. I never wanted to be a bestseller. I just, you know, they say there's a book inside everyone, don't they? And so whilst my book, the first book, Positive Changes, doesn't speak about my fertility, what it does do, it inspires you to create positive changes, because it's everything I tried and everything I learned about when you're at rock bottom, please just get back up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I know there's mental health, and when our loved ones die, it feels like, you know, part of us die, part of our story dies, with everything seems unknown and overwhelming. But if you're at rock bottom, I keep seeing that Ten of Swords as I'm saying it, that Ten of Swords card, when you're at rock bottom, you can't go any further. So please just try and come back up.
You know, this touches on two things I know. And I mean, on my prior podcast, I've talked about it. My mom committed suicide, and I had that conversation with her many a times, that you can continue on, things can change. And that's, you know, that's the one thing. There's certain people that you will never change their mind. They're on a mission to do it. And there's other people that one moment of reaching out to them can help and change everything. As far as, yeah, when my husband passed in the car, I knew he was gone. But they brought him back an hour later, and I knew when they told me he died in the ER again, and they brought him back. And when they asked me, they're like, "Do you want to put him on a ventilator?" I'm like, "How is his mind going to be?" Because I know he's already been oxygen deprived for at least an hour. Oh, well, we don't know yet. So you walk this fine line, because you're like, well, what if there's that chance?
Yeah.
So I'll put him on there. So they woke him up. This was Monday. They woke him up Tuesday, and he seemed very disoriented, but he was there for a brief moment. And then, and he was trying to talk, and I'm thinking he was trying to tell me he loved me, because I told him I loved him, and we didn't get to really say that initially in the car, because he was gone quickly. And then I had to make that decision on that Saturday. Do I pull the plug? Because I didn't want to let him linger. And I knew I had to do self-care. I wasn't one of those people that stayed at the hospital every day, because I knew he wouldn't want me there, and this was destroying me. So I went to the hospital. I saw him that Saturday. His friend came in, and I made a decision to have him off of life support. He lasted until Monday, and I was about to go up to the hospital that Monday. But I'm like, I am so exhausted. I'm going to take something to help me sleep for a little bit longer, and then I'll go. And a half hour after I took it, the doctor called to tell me he had passed. And so I was like, well, that was his spirit trying to tell me, to coax me to be okay. We had a little store here in town, and the only reason I'm telling you this is because it's about spirit. And he used to sew in there. in this one room. And so after I cleaned up everything and I was looking, standing by the door to that room. And as I was looking in, yes, I'm feeling all the sadness because I used to stand there and watch him sew. And I felt him behind me, rubbing my shoulders and my back, like telling me it was okay. And so, speaking of the grief, so here I am, he's gone. I've been with him 16 years. This has been our life. And I have to make a decision because I learned how to eat my grief. That was something my mother instilled. And so I made a choice to, I either have to eat my grief or I have to lose weight and get healthy. I chose to get healthy. And it's not been an easy battle, but I've lost 30 something pounds since he died in June. And I'm still working on losing more, but I chose to take a step into the living, just like doing the podcast. I chose to be in the living and know that my journey's not over. And like you, if 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 anybody listening to this and they are feeling a little helpless or hopeless, like, well, what am I going to do? My career's completely changed. I went through a complete career change, and like you, nursing was your identity. Me being a claims supervisor was enmeshed so deeply in me that you have to step away and go, that's not really who you are. It's a title of and a part of you, but it's not who you are. So find out, get to the root of who you are. And that's what you've done, obviously.
Yeah, and it's hard. We give ourselves such a hard time in life, I find, because I did nursing, then I had these fertility issues. I stepped away from nursing, then went back because I really wanted these children, but then I was like, oh my god, who am I if I'm not that label of mum?
Yeah.
And I'd wanted these children for so long, but then I was like, I don't know if I like the title of mum. Do you know what I mean? It just felt frumpy and I didn't feel alive, and was I making a difference when actually we're always making a difference, and we shouldn't fill those roles, whether we're like working in claims or working in hospitals. It's just keep searching all the time.
I
It
mean,
doesn't pay the bills so well being an author podcast, if I'm honest, but
no.
my life is rich in other ways. And it goes back to the end of life again, that at the end of your days, it's not about the money. Never once was I asked, like, could you get in my designer shoes and we just the designer outfit or the brand new car? It's not about that. It's always like, can you bring in my daughter, my ex-wife? I want to say sorry. It's about people, not things at the end of a life. It's not about the titles we do, it's about the difference we made within that title, maybe. So
There was, go ahead.
no, I just have this thing about always really keep going. But
Yeah.
I say I understand what you're saying about suicide as well, that some people just don't want to be saved, and it is overwhelming, and it just breaks my heart. It truly does. I had a lady on my podcast, suicide survivor, and she was amazing because she just said, like, spot onto camera, she just said to the audience to sort of just know there's nothing you could have done in that moment. It was
Right.
their choice. It's the only way they could see out. And I think that's what's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
In life, in death, whether it's suicide, murder, sudden, slowly, we always want to think that we could have, I don't know, changed that journey, but we can't.
No. Yeah, there was a woman that I read, an older woman that I read tarot for at a party. And when I stepped into her energy to read her doing tarot, I felt exhausted. And so as I'm reading her, she's sitting there telling me, I'm telling her all about her kids. Okay. All about her grown kids. She's an older lady. I'm telling her about her grown kids. And she looks at me and she goes, I don't want to know about my kids. I want to know about this man I'm seeing. I want to know all about him. Okay. Well, it's really late. So guess what? I'll come back and read you for free. I'll do that, no problem. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. So I get in my car, my energy is like back 100%. Like, okay. About a month later, I run across one of her friends at the grocery store. And she's like, I'm glad I found you. I'm like, why? She goes, well, such and such. I'm like, yeah. She goes, she, a couple of days after you read her, she had pneumonia and she ended up dying. And I thought to myself, okay, so that's why she needed to hear about her kids, even though she didn't want to.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing. Sometimes we get messages, whether it be your intuition or card reading or whatever. Sometimes we hear a message and sometimes it resonates with us, just like you realizing going back, it's like, no, this isn't right. This is not who I am. When I worked in claims, um, I used to have to judge how much somebody's injury was worth, how
Mm.
much was their life worth? How much, and I'm not meaning life, but how much was losing their career or this and that? And I had fallen and hurt myself. So suddenly, and I was a supervisor by this point, suddenly I'm like looking at myself going, what gives me the right to judge somebody else's pain and suffering and injury? Because we all suffer differently. So it was a really, and I mean, there was other reasons why I ended up leaving, but it becomes a mental mindset of this is not working for me. And how can I do this? Same thing with the nursing. How do you do this if it's not in your mindset? You have to make those changes.
Yeah, and it's hard because obviously I left thinking I've got this, I've nailed it, and then I'm like, I'm just going to go back actually for another year, and I'm quite feisty, and I'm like to think I'm quite clear on what I'm doing, but even for me, I was just like, no, I'm not ready, because you do get these labels, you do get these roles, these safety nets in life, and it's finding something that throws you out, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and it's some of the labels that I don't like. Like for me, when I divorced, I've been married before, and when I divorced, I went back to being single. I was happy being single. There was no reason for me to tell anybody I was divorced on a form. I thought this is none of your business that I was divorced. And if I got involved with somebody, sure, I'll tell them I was divorced. But now, because I'm a widow, it's on my car insurance. I'm like, even my doctor's office are like, so married marital status. I'm like, well, I'm a widow now, but I prefer not to use that word. She goes, okay, we'll say you're single. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Because why do I have to have that label? And that's the thing. We fall into these traps of being labeled all the time in different ways, whether it be career, our marital status, our skin color, our sexual preference. Why do we have to be labeled?
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we just get lost in it, because as you say, there's labels at everything, like who you married to, how old are you, where do you live, and you're just sort of like, they're just layers, life's heavy enough and now these extra layers on it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's where we lose our identity then. We all become just a statistic of, oh, well, you're in this demographic. Oh no, you're in this you're a Gen Z, you're a boomer. What? How about I'm a person?
Yeah.
Um, so currently you're not doing the nursing, correct? You're just
No.
playing mom. So how old are your kids?
14, 10, 8 and 6.
It's a nice diverse span.
Yeah.
So maybe in a way, if you look at it from a positive side, you have enough of an age gap so you weren't so overwhelmed with all of them being so close together.
Yeah, I did want them all together, and that's like, because
Um,
people often look at them and they
mm,
say, oh, that's nicely planned. I'm like, no, because actually when our daughter was, so it goes boy girl boy girl, so we had a boy girl, and then that's when the like consecutive losses started happening. We actually tried after about 4 weeks. You can't imagine, can you, having sex after 4 weeks of labor? But we did. But then there's a 2-year gap, so I
yeah.
actually wanted them a lot closer. I wanted that whole sort of like 3 under 5 kind of thing, but it just wasn't my story. But now I'm
Um,
quite grateful for the gap.
well, I'm sure, like I said, I know people that, my husband's family, it was like three of them back to back. And they had two there's a big age difference early, and then there's three back to back. And while my husband tells me these stories about how great it was that they were all together, as adults, they were not as all together. But that's his journey. And it's interesting because family dynamics, because of the age difference with your kids, are they still as close or are they night and day? You know?
No, they're really close. We've noticed just this year that when we drop them off at school, well, the youngest three are the ones at the secondary school, but when you drop them off, they all hug each other goodbye before they go into class. All the other sort of siblings are like giving each other a quick slap, and they're darting off. But our family just like squeeze each other and hug each other, have a nice day. So they are really close, which is probably why I had four. I think if they'd have been a bit rude, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But no, they are really close. They're all totally different personalities. The amount of times we've been asked as husband and wife, like, oh, are you foster parents? We're like, no, but they just look like that. So like, no, one's got darker eyes, one's got darker hair, one's really painfully shy, the other one's like just handing her way through life. They're all really different. But no, I did make them. I do remember it quite well.
So, having the kids and having them being so different, did you foster or do you foster meditation with them? Do you foster trying to get in touch with what their, I don't want to say true purpose, but what they really desire? I mean, I would assume that you're one of those parents when they say, "Oh, I want to do this." You're like, "Okay, let's experiment and see what's going on."
Yep. So the youngest three, actually, no, all of them have tried meditation, especially for stress and mindfulness. Just last night, my husband and I did yoga with our eldest daughter. I think journaling, we're really open communicators. It's just sort of get everyone talking about how you're feeling, where is it in your body. We do body pendulum, where you sort of ask your body and you rock back and forth. But no, we just, the tools saved my life. So, and I worked at end of life, this whole connecting is what they tell you end of life. It's about speaking your truth, connection to others. My journey is finding tools that work for me, whether that's, having an evening to yourself, drinking more water, holding a crystal, meditation. So our kids they're not hippie, they don't wear tie-dye or anything like that, but they are, really down to earth. Like we do breath work, like when you breathe along your fingers, in, out, in, out. We do yoga with them. Even walking outdoors, they have to go outdoors at least once a day, even if it's horizontal rain or a blizzard, still go outside. It's good for your lungs,
Do you limit their internet and social media then?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Well, that's a good thing though.
Yeah.
I mean, you're truly being a parent because you're trying to teach them something that I'm sure you didn't learn, stress management. If stress management were taught to the younger or the older generations, I think we'd be in a much different place in the world.
Yeah, we have our eldest two, so they're 14 and 10. They both have mobile phones now, but there's a contract that we can check your phone whenever we like to make sure you're not being inappropriate to anyone, you're not at risk of being bullied, you're not accessing things on the internet, which isn't what you need to hear, so people might not like that, but it's just like, I'm paying for your phone,
Hmm.
but you've got access to the world. I need to make sure you're safe with that. So we do check their phones. They're not allowed in their bedrooms at night. If they do have like games, like when I'm podcasting and that, it's hour on, hour off, but you have to go outdoors, you have to be hydrated. So yeah, we do, and the electronics, it's quite funny because you don't realize, because whatever you do in life, just becomes your norm. And we got taken in last year by one of the school teachers at primary school. I said, Mrs. Knight, could I just have a word about Poppy's homework? I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, well, they're meant to be working online doing this maths program, but she says she's not allowed electronics at home unless it's the weekend. So she hadn't done her homework because you're not allowed on a tablet. Do you know what I mean? You can read a book, you can do art and crafts. We've got a massive trolley of art and crafts, anything sensory, you can have it. But yeah, I got taken aside by a teacher, say sort of like, Poppy said that she doesn't have a tablet and that's what their homework is. Do you think she could access one? I was like, oh yeah, this week she could. But you don't realise, do you, that everyone just automatically has these electronics. You can do, do this, do that. And I'm like, not in our house.
But see, that's I applaud you for that, and somebody will disagree. When I was a stepmom, there the show Full House was on at the time, and I didn't have a problem with it. We didn't have the Disney Channel, but the girls started watching it, and it was all fine and dandy until the youngest one decided to start mimicking lines and being a little smart mouth. And people can chastise me for this, but I'm like, okay, guess what? We can't watch this show anymore. And she's like, but why? I said, because you're picking up bad habits. If you're going to pick up bad habits from that, we can't watch it. And she wasn't pleased at first, but ultimately I think both of them realized what I was getting at, because I watched my nieces and we were babysitting them once. They were watching Hannah Montana, and it was like I sat there mortified because they were mimicking everything. And it's like, well, but their mom is really kind of tight. She's kind of like, well, they can't have a computer. They can't do this. I'm like, but you're letting them watch this. So, I mean, I think that's one thing. We are so busy now with technology and everything coming at us that we don't have that time to decompress, and we don't have enough time to monitor what our kids are doing because we're trying to make a living and provide for them. So I think there's so much pressure now that how much are we parenting and how much are we not parenting? It sounds like you got that down pat, though.
Well, I have days where I just think, like, just have it. I mean, I'm living with long COVID at the moment, so I get exhausted and
Hmm.
I can't do like the run around the park, and I can do a bit of art and crafts, but it's quite limited. And you do have things like just have your tablets. They think it's the best day ever, I'm sure. Do you know what I mean? It's not a meditation in sight. But absolutely, if you're struggling with your own mental health, or me, is like my own energy levels, you have that need. But then because it's so precious, it
Hmm.
kind of works.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they had it every day. I think I'd sort of feel really bad that have it every day, and there's another day do the same old thing. But it
Well,
goes back to the fact that I'm a bit of a curious soul and I always like to do different things.
well, but that's the thing. You're showing them diversity, and they're not so attached to things. And whereas you and I are close in age, we had magazines to show us how to look. Now we have, oh, look, there's all these people, these celebrities on social media that have photoshopped their picture to
Yeah.
way beyond belief. And you have kids going, well, I want to look like that. Well, there's no way in reality they even look like that. So by giving them a healthy dose of reality and keeping them grounded, that is, I applaud you for that. I do. I do.
Oh, bless you. My daughter doesn't. She's going to secondary school in September. It's like, Mum, when can I wear makeup? It's like, when you're 21?
You
She's
know,
like, you're kidding me. I was like, you have to ask yourself, why do you want to wear makeup? And she's stunning, my daughter. She's got really long dark eyelashes, and her lips, even her hairdresser said, like, has she got lipstick on? I was like, no, she's just got this beautiful dusky rose lips,
nice.
really thick eyelashes, but then blonde hair. And it's like, I want to know why you want to wear makeup. Do you want to wear makeup for your confidence? Do you want to wear makeup because everyone else is doing it? Because I want you to know that she's just beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely stunning. And it is, yeah. So you might think it's lovely. She's not at the moment, because I'm like, no, not having it.
No, but but you see, I had a mom like you, because I think I was 13, 14 years old, and I'm like, Mom, can I wear makeup? No, you can't. But why not? You can't wear makeup. I couldn't shave. Can I shave my legs? Because the first time a boy put his hand on my leg, it was kind of like, he's like, oh, Harry. And I'm like, I just haven't shaved. I had never shaved. So we came to a compromise to use Nair, and I don't know if you know what Nair is. That's
Yeah.
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 That was like the worst nightmare back then. But it took me. I moved in with my grandma for a year, and since Mom was gone, I wore makeup. But when I moved back in with her at 16, she was just kind of like, "What is that on your face? You got too much on." Sorry. And then about 2 years later, she wanted me to show her how to do her makeup. So, but yeah, I mean, my mom was very much a stickler. No makeup. You can't wear this. I had bought this really cool dress. She's like, nope, you look too old. That dress has to go back. Okay, but it's just a dress. Nope, you look too old. So I understand what you're saying, and you do want your kids, because the longer your kid can go without makeup, that their skin stays better for one, and they get to be true to them. But it could be a lot to do with the norms. Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. And that's hard, isn't it? I don't remember anyone wearing makeup in my school. Well, that's just, I don't think I felt really old then, Dawn. I was thinking, did they have makeup in my days? No, they must have done. Must have done 40 years
Oh,
ago. Yeah.
that's when they used to do the berries and twigs. No, I understand. I mean, it's like makeup has changed, and now just the way everybody's wearing it, I'm looking at people, I'm going, okay, I don't know that I would do that, but okay. But
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot more. The internet is great because we've opened up this whole world of expression and freedom and creative ideas, but then there's some toxic bits to it. And I think that as a parent, you have to find that balance. It's important. And I think you're doing that, even much to your daughter's chagrin. You know, she'll understand one day when she's a parent, and her daughter will do the same thing. And it'll be like, oh, now I get why my mom did
Yeah.
that. I completely understand. So one I wanted to touch on real quick about your stepfather dying. So I take it he was a very positive influence in your life.
Yeah. He's gorgeous. Just, I'd say now, like, all these years later, that he's probably an earth angel that's just meant to step into my life for a few years there. Just a really gorgeous man. And he was just always positive. My mum might disagree, but to me, my stepdad was always positive, almost annoyingly so. And I think I've just merged into him, if I'm honest. But like when my mum was diagnosed with cancer, or if I had a relationship breakdown or come back from my travels and things like that, he used to say the same thing. He used to say two things. It used to be like, it'll be all right. So even if someone was died or dying, it's like, it'll be all right. And he said it's so much. It's our warped humour in our family. I just disclaimer this, but he used to say it'll be all right. And that's on his gravestone, on his headstone. It's got like his name
Uh-huh.
when he died. It's got it'll be all right because he just told us all the time. So on his
Nice,
headstone, it's got it'll be all right. And the
nice.
other thing is what I use as part of my branding, which is life goes on. Because I used to say sort of like, oh God, I didn't get that job, or oh my God, this is such a no, I don't like this relationship. He goes, oh well, life goes on. And I used to be so annoyed to be there, with dyed red hair and my big, black cherries lipstick, angry goth stage of life, with my Smith's t-shirt on. And he'd be like, oh no, life goes on. Oh, and I was so angry. And then I get,
Yeah,
to the end of my life, not end of my life, I don't want to die at 47 really,
no.
but getting to where I am now. And I'm like, oh, life does go on.
Yeah.
Not how we anticipated it, not maybe as we had wished it did, but life does truly go on.
And that's the whole thing. I mean, when you're younger, it's like the smallest thing that boy broke up with me. Oh my gosh, I'm never gonna survive. Oh yeah, you will. You will. But
Yeah.
we don't see that. We do not see that at that moment. And that, I guess that comes with age,
Yeah.
being able to reflect.
And it's hard, isn't it? Because you sort of like when you like you've got a teenager, so it's getting to that sort of dating stage. And it's really hard. My husband has to pull me back because he's saying, Shelley, he needs to learn. I'm just like, oh, cotton wool, bubble wrap, anything to protect him. And it's just really hard when you just think, oh, treat my son nicer. Don't say that. Are you going to be all right? And it's really hard. I mean, my background, we could be on it for hours. I won't go into it, but I've had like domestic violence and things like that in my life. And I just get really protective. And I shouldn't, because if I hadn't had the domestic violence or people attempting to end my life, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. So I know I have to let my children go and make their own mistakes, their own learning. But God, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a matter of, you want to protect them, you want to make sure they're okay into the very, in everything. But sometimes, when my stepdaughter got married when she was 21. She got married. She was thrilled because she was doing it on 7/7 of '07. It was going to be this wonderful day. I'm like, okay. So she calls me and she's like, I'm getting married. And she's all excited. And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking, I get off the phone with her. And this is my stepdaughter from my first marriage, but I still talk to her. So I get off the phone with her and I look at my husband and I'm like, I'm happy she's doing this. I'm going to go to the wedding. Yes. It's not going to last. She's 21 years old. It's not going to last. He goes, but you didn't say anything. I'm like, no, it's not my place to. So fast forward, we go to the wedding. 2 months after they're married, the marriage falls apart.
I
And
know
so
I'm laughing. I shouldn't laugh, should I?
no, but
Sorry.
so I'm on the phone with her and I said, yeah, I kind of knew that was coming. She goes, what do you mean you knew that was coming? I said, when you called me and told me you were going to get married, I said, I didn't think it was last. I told John I didn't think it was going to last. And she's like, why didn't you say something? I said, because there's two things that would have happened. I would have said it. You would have said, no, you're wrong. You would have got mad at me. And 10 to 1, you wouldn't have wanted to talk to me anymore. She goes, oh, well, Bob said that too, her stepfather. I'm like, okay. She goes, but neither one of you wanted to say anything. I'm like, because it's your mistake to make and your mistake to learn from. We
Yeah.
can't jump in there and fix it for you. So I think
It's
that,
hard, isn't it?
yeah,
Because you think, oh, but as you say, in that moment, you'd have come off as the bad person.
yeah,
You'd be like, this is my happy day. You can't be happy for me and all that kind of thing, isn't it?
exactly. So you just step back and you celebrate the day and you celebrate the moment and you pray that you're wrong and you know, and then if you're not, then you accept it and go, okay.
Yeah.
So I know you have a podcast. So what is your podcast name?
I'll explain why it's called what it is, because people are like, really? It's come from the first book. So the first book was Positive Changes, a self-kick book. And it was my teenage son again. He made me realize that not everyone's a reader. And I had this real passion for helping people feel inspired to create positive changes. So he's like, well, I don't read a book. So the other people don't read a book. So then I thought I'll make a podcast. And I'd never listened to a podcast, but I have a great curious mind, thinks I'll just try anything, let's have a go. So it's Positive Changes, a self-kick podcast. So it's literally bringing the tools from the book into people's ears. Was my plan. The universe and my listeners had other plans.
Of course, of course.
So it started out as a solo show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just me and my book sharing pain points, sort of like, the search for happiness, who am I, speak your truth, overcoming fears and things like that. But about 3 weeks in, people started reaching out going, I love your show, but I've been through my own positive change, which wasn't fertility or death. Can I share my story and the tools? And I'm a polite girl, so I went, yeah, sure, come on then. Think I'll do 6 solo, 6 guests, we'll all live happily ever after.
Ooh.
But no, it turned into an interview show.
Yeah.
And won 2 awards here in the UK.
Nice.
And it's it's a Positive Change Self-Kick podcast. We've done season 2 was 50 episodes.
Wow.
And we're just in season 3 now. Yeah.
Wow. That's
and it's so I did that. And then my son still didn't listen to it. I was like, I've just done a podcast. And he goes, yeah, I'm more into YouTube now, Mum. So now there's Shelley F YouTube channel for anyone that doesn't read a book, listen to a podcast. I'm over there. If he comes up with any ideas, I'm going to stick him in the garden.
But I mean, obviously his insight has helped you grow. So that's a good thing.
Yes. Another, things happen for a reason. Life goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have 2 books out, and is there going to be a 3rd book? Are you writing another book, or is it just going to be the 2?
No. So Good Grief. That's my short title. Books got a bit passionate and called it Good Grief, the A to Z approach of modern day grief healing, if you will. That's out September. But it's serious, really, and it's spiritual, and it's the clinical medical. But I've started book 3, which is just my crazy journey, as we probably realised from today, my crazy journey and relationship with spirituality. And so in there, it's like when I first tried meditation, it wasn't a success story. And then my shamanic drumming journey, that was a nightmare. I felt a bit spacey. Everyone else in the room was kind of like, I'm at one with the universe. And I was speaking to the natives, and they come to me and they went, how was the journey? And I went, oh, I felt quite sick, and I felt like I was turning into sort of like a batter mix. I was like... So my next book is very Shelley. It's just me, like, spiritually, meditation's great for you. However, disclaimer, here's how I started, and then it's shamanic journey. And however, this is how my journey was. So it's all the spiritual tools I use probably in my Daisy journey, my daughter's pregnancy. But it's not perfect. It's like, so if you try meditation and it's really weird, or if you do shamanic drumming and you think you turn into a Yorkshire pudding or a batter mix, keep going. But I don't know when it'll be out. But yes, it's all spirituality, the wonky donkey way. That's quite a good title. I might use that.
It sounds, it's a catchy title. The Wonky Donkey Way would definitely inspire somebody. So do you do healings or anything else beside the podcast and your books?
So I'm just creating a coaching program, because I'm always giving tips away on the podcast and in the book, like do these tools and that. But people need different levels of motivation. So you might read a book, listen to the podcast, or watch on YouTube. But I'm now creating a program so people can do like work with me. They're thinking, oh, thanks, love, you're mental. But yeah, you can work with me in a little group program, 1-to-1. And then I'm creating online programs, so courses, so people can do it in their own time. I'm trusting people to make their own positive changes.
But would you ever actually consider one-on-one consultations with people?
I think so. If I got the right person. Do you know what I mean? When I used to do clinical hypnotherapy and past life regression, that was another part of my journey when I stepped away from nursing. When I used to do that, I would never see anyone if they said, oh, my husband sent me because he says I've got to lose weight, or my wife sent me, I need to stop smoking, or I've got this block of commitment fear, and my boyfriend sent me. I'd always be like, no, thank you. You've got to want the change in you, not someone else dictating it. So absolutely would love to work with someone a 1-to-1 if they get my warped humor. For starting, open to spirituality, but if they really are ready to make the change, if they want to get over that fear of failure, that stuckness, the same old chapter, I would love it. Yeah.
So where's your podcast and where's your podcast and your books available at?
So I direct everyone over to the website. So that's just shelleyfknight.com, because there you can do like sign up to the newsletter. There's all the Facebook, Twitter, Instagrams, YouTubes, podcasts, everything's there. And if it's not, let me know and I'll slap my husband for not putting it there.
So are you on TikTok then?
No, too old, lovely. Wouldn't know what to do.
Oh, no, no. Honestly, there is now a migration of older people on TikTok. There is.
Oh, is it? I'm on Clubhouse. I thought that was
Not,
quite down with the kids on Clubhouse.
try Quilt. Quilt would be a good place for you as well. Quilt is an app that is
Oh,
basically all about self-care and self-help.
oh, look at that. Say career progress with Donna. I love it.
I mean, this most likely should be something off air, but yeah, Quilt.
No, sharing is caring, love.
Because I mean, there's times when I've logged into Quilt and I was having an issue with somebody, and it just so happened that they were having a discussion about relationships and friendships, and I was like, oh, okay, well, let me join this chat, and you can either observe or raise your hand and be part of the conversation. So it's a very unique app. TikTok, I'm on there a little bit. I'm
Oh,
making
you're so cool.
no, no, no.
You're breaking out dance moves and things.
No, no, I don't do dance moves. I usually do blind reacts. And, there was somebody posing a question the other day about writing because I'm an author. And she posed the question of, is it normal for you to suddenly just get random scenes coming into your head in your stories? And so I answered them like, oh, yeah, I have scenes from book 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, they're coming all the time, whenever. So, yeah, that's what I do on TikTok. But so that's an option for you now. So your website once again is
shelleyfknight.com.
all right. And let's see. So let's go back to the original question. So was it good to follow your dreams? Was it better to have followed your dreams to be a nurse and take this wild and crazy journey or not?
Absolutely. Always follow your passion, that niggle, your heart, always follow it. Yeah, I wouldn't be the woman I am today. I'd like to think I made a difference to people on the way as well. But yeah, you always have to follow the passion. Don't die with, that what if's inside of you. Just go for it each and every time.
And you're still following your passion. It's just a little bit
Yeah.
different. You're still
Yeah. It's the wonky donkey version and I love it.
well, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure having you and talking to you. And thanks again.
Bless you. I've absolutely loved it. And thank you for sharing your stories. I feel truly inspired. So thank you.
No worries.